everybody. Raina here. Thank you for tuning in to Book Banter. This evening, I will be speaking with Nuha Fariha. She is a first-generation queer Bangladeshi writer. Her work has appeared in RoadRunner Review, MAGMA, Thin Air, and multiple others. She's currently earning her MFA in creative writing at the Louisiana State University, and this is her first book. God Morning's Tiger Nights is a great poetry book. I have read it twice now, most recently just a couple of days ago to prep for this event. And I am very excited to talk to her about this. It runs the gambit from these tender, emotional moments to like this just, you could feel the power and the like emotion of like, I want to say rage. We're going to go that far through some of these poems. And I just love the mixture of that. And we're going to talk to her about that this evening. If you have any questions for Nuha or for myself during the event, type them in the comments below and we will answer them in real time. So without further ado, Nuha, hi.
Hi, how are you, Raina?
So good. How are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm loving the tigers on your shirt.
Thank you.
That was pre-planned.
It was definitely premeditated.
Okay, wait. Follow-up question: did you have that shirt before the cover and title of your book?
No, I actually follow this activist called Charmine on Instagram, and she sells sometimes like bits of her outfits. And I saw this, and I was like, I have to get it. This is perfect.
Nice.
That's where it came from.
I love that. So, what is the tiger connection? Because I read the book, and there aren't a lot of tigers. There's some tigers, but what's the tiger connection?
Yeah. So this whole book kind of came about during my first week at LSU. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Mike the Tiger.
Yes, that mascot, right?
The actual tiger that was on campus. And so I was trying to navigate my way back to my car one day after class, and I came across Mike the Tiger's cage. And before that, I didn't even know there was a live tiger on campus. So that fact just kind of really stuck with me. And I grew up in Bangladesh where there were like a lot of Bengali tigers. And as I kept thinking about it, I was like, what are the odds that I'd come across a Bengal tiger in the middle of Louisiana? And that's how all of this sort of came about. It kind of prompted me to think about like traveling, like we were talking about previously, but also about diaspora and journeys and what all of that kind of means. And yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's I have never thought of like tigers or animals in that context. But you're absolutely right, obviously. Where did the tiger come from? How did it get here?
Yeah.
Why is it in Baton Rouge specifically? Yeah, and also I've also never really thought about this either, but how many universities have like tigers? Like I know there's like Georgia has a bulldog, like you think of like maybe dogs or something that is already like domesticated, but how many schools just have like an exotic animal?
Or even I know the Bengal tiger is on a baseball team too. Out of Cleveland or something. And that always also struck me too. I'm like, where? Because it's just such a different context than what I'm familiar with tigers as.
Right. When I've been on LSU's campus a couple of times, but never had the opportunity to really wander around the campus. I'm always going somewhere very specific. And then it's interesting that you can just like walk up on the tiger, like he's not even hiding somewhere.
No, it's a whole exhibit. You can just go and visit the tiger. Actually, if you look on Yelp, it's like the #1 attraction in Baton Rouge.
Oh my gosh, Baton Rouge has a lot more to offer. No offense to Mike the Tiger.
It does. I agree with you. But I think he just has such a big following.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's probably a lot of people that come either are going to school or did go to school there. And then I can see that if I went to school there and we happened to be in Baton Rouge, then I'd be like, oh, come on, son, let's go see the tiger. He's right here. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I never knew how many people knew of LSU before I came here. One time, me and my partner were in upstate New York, like camping, and someone recognized this LSU shirt, and they're like, "Yeah, go LSU!" It's just, yeah.
So where are you from? Where did you move to LSU from? Where were you
Yeah,
living before you went to LSU? Sorry, that was a
yeah,
weird way to get
yeah,
there.
okay, I completely understand. I was living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which
And
I
did you go to school there?
no, I went to school in upstate New York. But I went to like high school and stuff near Philly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is beautiful. Philadelphia is one
Mhm.
of those places I've only actually been there once. I drove through again one more time. But like the 4 days I spent there were just weirdly magical. Like I loved the downtown area, and we
Yeah.
went on this carriage ride, which is so touristy. But like I remember the guy who did the tour looked like the main character from A Clockwork Orange. Do you know who that is?
Really?
Yes.
Like the main actor?
Yes.
Mm,
But in his outfit, like he wore a vest and a hat. Anyway,
no.
it was a thing for me.
Okay.
And it helped my visit to Philadelphia. But I really had a magical time there altogether and learning about the history that I didn't really know about.
Mhm.
And I think it's one of those places I sort of I don't know if my memories are accurate,
Mhm.
when you visit somewhere and then you don't go back. People do that with New Orleans all the time.
Yeah, you tend to like romanticize a little bit in your head.
Yeah, so it's very possible that's what I'm doing. I'm aware of that, but
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Jen says she's very excited for your book.
Yeah. Thank you, Jen. Jen, speaking of traveling, she's one of those people who's gone pretty much everywhere. I think right now she's in Nairobi, Kenya, and she's on her way to South Africa. Uh,
Nice.
mhm.
For business or pleasure, Jen? You have to.
I'll let
I mean,
Jen
I imagine that it's
pick
kind of
up.
for pleasure anyway, even if you are
Mhm.
like hopping around for a project or for work.
Yeah.
My husband travels for work, and anytime that we get to like hop along with him, even when he's not going
Mhm.
somewhere quite as exciting
Mhm.
as Kenya. Digital, see, yes, it's business and pleasure. I love it.
Mhm.
Love
Yeah.
it.
I know, in 2021, I dragged my son and my partner across like 19 states with me to like
Yes.
for work stuff and for book related stuff. Yeah, I
Oh my
don't know
God,
if I quite keep up.
2021 too. They were little. Your son must have been like tiny.
Mhm.
Oh,
But yeah,
with my son, those little years were actually the time. Like the first year, I could drag him anywhere. He was a
exactly.
good baby. He did not. He's like cool. I have food.
Mhm.
You cuddle enough. We're good to go. He's just
Yeah.
go wherever. Yes.
So it's like they can't put up as much of a protest. Whereas now, if I try to take him somewhere that long, he would be shouting and screaming, and yeah,
Yeah, the constant flow of like action that you'd have to provide for that much of a road trip is just like you're like not worth it.
yeah, exactly.
I always used to be I'm still a road trip person, but I always used to be more of a road trip person. Like we didn't stay in one place even when we were like vacationing for very long.
Mhm.
But after my son around that age, like 2, 3, 4, somewhere in there, I was like, okay, I do understand the merit of going to one location, staying there for a week, and then coming straight back. I get that now. Finally, I always thought like, oh, that's what people do. They get that.
Mhm.
It's just like a stereotypical family older person thing. And I was like, nope, I get it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it forces you to kind of slow down a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
mhm.
Um, some of your poems, uh, you're having a kid is I don't know if it's specifically your son, but having a
Mhm.
child, it definitely plays into that. But you were saying that you wrote these, so these would have been written a little like right when you had him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was about like 8 months or so, when I first started to think of it as a collection.
So when you were writing, like what made you transition to that? I always wonder about that because I write poetry and I know plenty of people who write poetry, but and some have put out 20 books and some have put out none. You know,
Mhm.
what is it that made you like go, okay, maybe this is a thing. Like maybe this is a cohesive thing.
That's a good question, and it's very tough to answer for poetry because I feel like it's so hard to connect it all together. Like even when I was thinking about the blurb for this piece, it took me like a month because I just didn't know how to piece it all together.
Mhm.
But I think part of what inspired me is that I was in Ariel Francisco's poetry class, and we were specifically looking at poetry collections, like the first poetry collection that an author put out. And that inspired me because oftentimes when you study the works of author, like if it's their third or fourth book, you're oftentimes like inspired and awed by how they got there, but you can't really see the process. So I think
Right.
looking at their first collections was definitely an inspiration.
That that makes sense. Like it's true. You will read someone's like fifth novel and you're like,
Hmm.
well, of course. Yeah, I was at Mississippi Book Festival recently and I listened to Ann Patchett speak, and she was talking a lot about how like she chose her cover, and that if you want your cover, you just have to like tell them this is the cover. And I'm like, yes, great advice, but also in the back of my head I'm like, you're Ann Patchett. Of course you did. You just
Yeah.
walk into the office and you go, this is my cover. And they're like, okay,
Hmm.
Ann Patchett, okay. Right? So I don't know that you got like that at the beginning, but it is nice to go in with sort of that confidence. It's nice. And then
Hmm.
just be ready for them to be like, I don't know. That's a pretty picture, but maybe you
Hmm.
need to write like 8 more novels. So yeah, going back and like for to see where people where they came from and now
Yeah,
where they are, and that is
exactly.
even as a reader, I'm not looking to put together like to write a novel or something, but having that being able to really see like this is
Hmm.
not where everyone started. So I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Lavanya asked, how did motherhood contribute to your writing process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one that is difficult to answer because once I'm sure you relate to this, Raina, but once you become a mom, like everything is affected by becoming a mother. But specifically in terms of writing, I think it's forced me to slow down a lot because I have such limited time, but it's also forced me to become much more productive during that time. Like, for example, in the past, I've had like this whole writing ritual. I'd like light a candle, I'd read a little bit, and I'd like think about it. And like, because I had the luxury of having time to do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like I'm lucky if I get 30 minutes to an hour and that's it. So I know I have to get stuff written during that time. I have my timer set and I'm just like going. Um, yeah, but it's also, like, made me consider things in a different light too,
Mm-hmm.
um, because once you slow down, you, like, really, like, get down to the level of your child, you're basically looking at the world through new eyes and new perspectives, and I just really enjoyed that.
Yeah. One of my like biggest piece of parenting advice anytime a friend is getting ready to have their first baby, I'm like, just sit down on the floor with them. Just
Mhm,
like they're gonna be following you around and it's gonna get a little crazy. And what they really want you to do is just get down to their level and just look them in the eye for 2 minutes because time is just a mess.
mhm,
So that's all they want. And like I remember when my son was young and I did that, it does. That's that moment where you get like this whole you have to slow everything down to where they are. And then they're literally just like, look at that. And you're like, you're right. I've never looked at the shape of the bottom of this door, like how this like is carved in here. Just been in this house for 10 years, never looked at it. And here you are. This is the biggest thing you've got going on right now. And let's do it. Yeah. And
mhm,
you can find that kind of inspiration all over the place. You just we get caught up.
mhm. Yeah, my son, whenever we go on walks, what used to be a 10-minute walk is now a 30-minute like expedition.
Mhm, mhm.
Every single object needs to be touched and examined. And I think it shows up in my writing too, because a lot of the poems like center around specific objects because I've just become so fascinated with it.
So, um, one of my actual like favorite poems in here is "The woman tells me to lift my thumb and try again."
Mm-hmm.
And you don't say specifically what it's about, but
Yeah.
it's clearly about taking your fingerprint. Um, but I imagined it as sort of a citizenship type of thing. Okay,
Yeah.
that was just
You're
me imagining
spot
it.
on.
But like after I finished it, and I was like, okay, that's definitely what it is. And then I'm like, that doesn't mean that's what it is, right? Now, what is it exactly?
Yeah.
And so I love that. And everybody, you're obviously going to get a copy of the book at some point, and you need to do that. And you go in here and read this poem because I was like there. I was there, and I stopped myself, you know, and I'm like, maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, but
Mhm.
now that the confirmation is there, I'm absolutely not. And like I loved that. It was one of my favorite ones where I was transported to a place that I understood enough about to put myself in the room, but not enough about to like to be my own, you know, to put my own spin on it. And yeah, I don't know if you have anything to say about that
I
poem. I just
mean,
really needed you to know. I love that. You do a great job putting us there in that poem.
yeah, I mean, that's part of what I tried to do, and I'm glad that you got the citizenship part of it, but I'm also now curious about how to read it in different settings, like, because there are a lot of different settings where they collect your handprint. Um, like when I went to take like the MCAT, for example, they also like fingerprint you
Oh,
for security
interesting.
measures, I guess. I'm not really sure. Um, but yeah, now I'm looking at the poem in different with a different lens, so I appreciate that.
Well, see, I've never taken the MCAT, so I'm like, how when I took SATs and when I took those tests, they didn't. I mean, I went in and gave my name. Like,
Mhm.
but to think that like the security process is so great that like they literally like you're the only person who's allowed to have this test. It's fascinating, I guess.
It
It's a whole different world.
um, they will like you only have a small locker that you can fit a limited amount of things into, and you can only access it during the break times. They will also pat you down each time, and then you have to sign a waiver each time you leave the room and come back. So it's kind
Wow.
of, yeah, it's intense.
I mean, I don't want anybody to cheat on a test. Don't get me wrong, but it feels like a lot.
It is a lot for one small test. Yeah.
But you go, you take it, you pass. I guess you know that everyone else in the room
No,
got it right.
I guess. Yeah.
Um, so what's one of your favorite poems?
That's a great question. I think it changes a lot every time I read the book and I read through it. But I think one of my favorites is the After Flood poem, um, which is sort of structured differently than all the other poems. I don't know if folks who've gotten the book have
Mhm.
thought. Um, but I think one of the reasons that I'm most proud of it is just because it took me forever to format it like that. But I was drawing a lot of inspiration from this other poet whose name I can't remember at the moment, but she used to like pin her work down in all four corners with like geographic markers so you
Oh.
could tell where the poem is taking place. So I mentioned like the four big rivers that are in Bangladesh, and then I
Mhm.
wrote this immediately after there was a major flood last summer. So I was thinking about all the objects that kind of rise up from the river when there's flooding and what it would mean to like put a paper into the water and kind of capture those objects.
When you do you write longhand or do you type like when you write?
I type a lot of it
Okay.
again because of limited time. And yeah, if I type it, it's usually archived for a long time.
Okay, yeah, because I was wondering, like, with this poem specifically, when you're writing it, did you just sort of type it out and see it in your head and then go back and like piece it together, like do the formatting, or were you like literally like, no, this needs to be bold and it needs to be over there, like as you're writing it?
So I actually, for this poem, I went on Canva. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
familiar
yeah,
with.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
am.
my, it
Make
was
things
my
on
first time actually ever writing a poem using that platform. But I literally typed up all the words and then I just kept playing around with positioning them until it looked right.
Nice. I've never thought about like using Canva. I was on Canva today trying to make something, but not a poem. I've never thought about
Mhm.
like trying to write like creatively really on Canva.
It's
I'm into
fun.
it.
I took a workshop with Evie Shockley, and we talked a lot about like how poems appear on the page, and I
Mhm.
think that led to a lot of like experimentation in this collection, which I was excited about.
Nice. All right, Christy asks, what's the significance of your book title? We talked about the tiger specifically, but like God Morning's Tiger Nights, what is that?
Yeah, that is a great question again. So when I was done writing the collection, I took all the poems and I kind of made like a word cloud out of them, just because I was curious about it. And these were the four words that appeared the most out of the collection at that point. And I think what I really liked about it is kind of like the duality. There's morning and night. There's some duality between God as like, you know, an almighty being, and then tigers as animals. Um, and I liked putting the contrast together, which I think speaks a lot to the collection too. Like you were talking about, there's the tender moments, but then there's also moments of rage and anger, and they kind of
Mhm.
coexist in this same collection.
Yeah. When I was hesitant to say rage, but it's
Hmm.
more, it's like this buildup. It's like, I'm just going to go off on a small tangent. Like, there's two different kinds of spice, right? There's a spice that hits you immediately as soon as it hits the tongue. And then there's ones that, like, it's like bite 5, 6, 7. You're like, I don't think I can keep doing this, right? This is just
Yeah.
like, it's building. And you
Mhm.
feel that not just like within yourself, but you're talking about your family. So it's like generational and it's coming, and all of this is systemic. And
Mhm.
it doesn't feel like immediate rage. It feels like, look at all of this shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't like it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's a great
It
time.
mimics like a curry almost. Like if you're eating it, the
Yes.
spice level builds and builds.
Yes. Okay. As a person who did not grow up eating lots of curries and have all this experience with it, I've had to like teach myself. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the hardest things, is figuring out either how to cook it yourself where it's your actual level, because it could be your level at taste 1 and it is not your level at taste like 5. And
Hmm.
then also like finding restaurants that are the same. Like, how do you order it in a way that like I'm going to be able to finish this? And I love the challenge. I'm up for it.
You're
It's so
braver than me. I can't really handle too much spice. I'll always have like a mango lassi or some sort of
fun.
drink
Yeah.
right next to me to sort of help
Well,
moderate that.
that is the trick for anyone out there. It's that mango latte.
Hmm.
That's part of the trick. Yes, you want to order it. Yes, it's kind of like a milkshake thing if you don't know what it is, but go get it.
Hmm.
With the
Yeah.
meal, not after. With the meal.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, Parker asks, in your poem, Reader, I Married Him, what was it like to create the voice in that poem? I'm going to have to
Yeah.
find the page.
Yeah. So Reader, I Married Him was a fun poem for me a little bit. I was actually writing it in the voice of my mom. Um, because in a lot of conversations that we had while I was growing up, she expressed a lot of regret um, in her decision to marry my father initially. And so I was trying to think about what it might mean to be her at that, because she married him around the same age that, around like 18, 20. So I'm wondering, like, what does it feel like to make this huge decision and then immediately have that sort of regret or anger? Um, yeah. So I think in writing that poem, I had a lot of fun.
So, did did you talk to your mom about it? Can you read it?
That's a
What's
yeah.
the gist? Yeah,
So,
give us the tea on it. We have the explanation
well,
now.
I mean, me and my parents are kind of on a rocky journey at the
Mhm.
moment, so I
Okay.
haven't talked to them specifically about it. But I would be curious to see if she ever does pick up my collection, if she reads it, then what she would think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I I had to pull up the poem. I am so bad with titles or names and
Yeah.
everything, but I had to pull it up. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was. I agree. This is a very interesting, like an interesting poem, and those poetry and novels and stories, fiction allow us to kind of guess. So you have this image and this starting point and these ideas and these little bits of story, but you get to put yourself there. That's a fun. Christy says how difficult. So I guess yeah, difficult, fun, difficult. How was it
Well,
for you? Did you enjoy like the opportunity to kind of go back and
I
think
did.
about
I
it?
think it let me have a lot of empathy towards how my mom behaved towards me during childhood, because
Yeah.
then I was able to kind of figure out like she had all these other issues that were going on at the same time. And so, yeah, it made it a lot more human for me.
Well, poetry, writing in general becomes therapeutic like that
Mhm.
sometimes. You're like, even if you don't have the opportunity to figure it out with her, you're like, but I wrote the answer for myself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So Emily asks, did you have any specific writers or poets that you got inspiration from for this book?
Yeah, I mean, there were a ton of writers that I drew from. I read a lot of Fatima Ashgar, and specifically,
Mhm.
she has this collection called Halal If You Hear Me, that she co-edited with Sophia Lillo from Haymarket Books. And that collection really opened my eyes to the different ways that Muslim women could express themselves. Because before I read that collection, I think I always had this idea of like Muslim male poetry, but I wasn't really sure about like South Asian or Muslim women who were poets. And so seeing all the ways that they embrace their sexuality, that they embrace their complicated family dynamics, made me feel comfortable in doing my own.
Mhm.
So I think that was definitely a huge inspiration for this collection.
Nice. I'm typing her name in to see. I'm going to put a link to her
Yeah.
books on our website so y'all can take a look and see what she has available out there. Um, Christy also asks, how difficult was it to choose which poem would be included in the book? Oh, so how many did you have and how did you have to
Yeah.
cut it down?
That's a great question, actually. So when I first pitched the book to Game Over Books, I actually didn't finish the whole collection. So they came back to me being like, "We're very interested in what we saw so far. Can you finish out the collection?" And so I went up to Juniper Summer Institute. I was doing like a workshop
Mhm.
there with Evie, and that's when I kind of finished out the book. And that's why maybe it has some different tones to it because it was written in different periods of my life. Some of the poetry was written before motherhood, some was written right after I became a mom, and then some were written towards the end when I had like more experience in writing and more structure. So yeah, so I think in terms of narrowing down the collection, it wasn't a lot of narrowing down that I had to do. It was the opposite. I had to do a lot of expanding and building. um,
So when you did that, the ones near the end where you were like, I need more to go in this
mhm.
collection, um, were you just like trying to separate yourself from what you already had and like catch inspiration from wherever? Or were you thinking, oh, I need it to fit? Now that you had like a core group and you're like, I know I need like 10 more or whatever,
Mhm.
which like,
Yeah, it
you
was
get it.
definitely not like I needed it to fit, but it was more so because I was already thinking about these topics, then similar poems came that were in a similar vein of it. And I think having that extra time helped me sort of see the arc too of the book.
Mhm.
Because initially it was actually in two separate parts. One was all the motherhood poems, and the other one was all the daughter poems. But I didn't like keeping them separate. I felt like they should intermingle. And so
Yeah.
that's how it sort of came about like this.
I like this. Whoever, if you that was just you or somebody else gave you that advice, 2 thumbs up, because I like it where you're mixing, and it does kind of like, it still flows because it does very much come from like you're on sort of both sides. Well, and then you're talking
Mhm,
about, your mother at 19. You have a little line that says like my mother at 19 or something. But
mhm,
if you didn't have that, we wouldn't know if that was you or your mom, or like we wouldn't know,
exactly.
all of
Yeah,
that. And I love how you just sort of flow between that, and it's all you or inspired by you. You're not quite sure. I like that. If you had separated it, you'd be like, okay, this is this part, this is that part, and then people would be
yeah.
like, oh well, I don't have kids, so I don't need. People are weird. And then like you did separate it. And this way, you just have to like you read it all, and it's great. I love it.
Mhm.
So we have another question. You use so many different structures and styles across your collection. How do you choose the format of a poem, or does it present itself to you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I feel like it's one that comes up often in poetry in terms of like form and content and does one inspire the other? It's like a chicken and egg sort of situation. And I don't know if I have a satisfying answer to that. But for me, it's very much the content comes first. Like it's definitely an idea that I want to express on the page. And then from there, I kind of play around with how does this idea make the most amount of sense. So for example, there's the 99 poems for baby girls, which is one of my favorite poems in the collection. I was thinking a lot about what it means to name a child, right? And to put that forth into the world, because that's a huge responsibility. And then I was looking up, like, well, what do these names really mean, literally? And so I took 99 Arabic names and I literally translated them or transliterated them a little bit. And yeah, it was just very interesting to see how many of these names that we're giving to our children are just possessions or
Mhm.
just like objects. And then how other names have much more deeper meanings. And yeah. So all that to say is that I think a lot about the content first, and that informs the format of the poem.
Yeah.
That was a great question.
I did not know that's what that poem like was, like that you were literally like translating names. And I love it. I love
Mm,
it because it's it is so true. You names mean whatever they mean. And then I've always wondered, like, okay, and who made that up? Like,
mhm,
who gets to tell me what it means exactly? And then, yeah, what are you putting on a child? If it, and do you have to take all of this into account, or you're just like, I thought it was pretty,
mhm.
and is that good enough if you go look it up and it means this other thing, like that you made, do you have to change
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure with name picking.
Mhm.
I've even asked, like, I've asked friends who have changed their name as adults,
Mm, mhm.
and the most the the most often answer the most frequent answer that I've heard is like that it just sort of came to them, like it felt right to them, and
Mm.
so they didn't matter what it meant. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, and I'm like, well, that is kind of fascinating because as
Yeah.
parents, we put all of this effort into. We want it to sound good, but also,
Mhm.
yeah, I think most people do look at it. It means something.
Yeah.
Um, but I guess that's the benefit of choosing your name after you get older is you can just
You
wait
can
till it
change it.
feels right.
Yeah, and it's also interesting because sometimes we think names are set in stone, like you can never change it, but in reality, you do have a lot of power in controlling how people name you.
Yeah, both like legally on paper, and then also just you can make up your own nickname and people will call you that, and there's not a big deal about that. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, on almost every paper that I fill out, it's like your legal name and then what you want to be called or your nickname, and I'm like, okay, so I could just write anything there, right?
Mhm.
Basically, so it's good.
Yeah. I think
Wow.
that's where I struggle when it comes to writing, because as a poet, I'm like, I don't want to give anything a name. I want it to name itself, or what do
Mhm.
other people want to name it? They can interpret it themselves. Um, yeah.
Poetry is to me more like visual art in that it does
Mm,
have it's up for interpretation. I feel like a lot more than most novels or even short stories. They typically have an ending they're going for,
mhm,
and poetry does like. For example, we were talking about fingerprints and the citizenship. It could be a test. It could be being arrested. It could be like just going down and wanting to put my child's fingerprints on file so
mhm,
that you could find them. All of these different situations, and we can all see that sort of in a little bit of a different way because you don't specifically say exactly what you're doing, and I love that. Okay, so we have one more question before we wrap up.
mhm.
What surprised you the most, whether it was a particular poem or the writing process or anything like while you were
Yeah,
putting together this book?
what surprised me the most is how much you need a village, or how much of a village forms around a book, because that's my first time going through this experience. Obviously, I didn't know what to expect, but there's a lot. There's not just the publisher, but then you have the editor, you have all the folks who read your poetry in workshops and stuff beforehand, and they all come together to support you. You have all your friends and family and everyone else there. There's like a publicist to help. It's just a whole community sort of builds around this one book. And I think it's just really beautiful to see how much words still mean to us, and words can bind us together in community.
Absolutely. Like I say that all the time. This entire process is a village. Like I couldn't do what I do if you didn't do what you do. And obviously publishers and editors and printers and all of the other pieces that go together to make this puzzle so that we can all read and enjoy your poetry. So
So I think when you look at a book, it's not just one person. It's not just the author's hand. It's like everyone's hand is in it.
yes, absolutely. Well, Nuha, I want to thank you for joining me this evening for Book Banter. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. Oh, wait, this is an excellent last question. Can we expect a novel from you in the future? That just came to right to novel. Jen knows something that I don't know.
No, I think that's a good question. Not maybe not a novel, but I am working on my thesis, which looks at women who are incarcerated in Louisiana between 1800 to 1913, like when they were held at the East Baton Rouge Penitentiary. And I'm thinking about what form that work could take. Maybe a novel. We'll see. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we'll keep an eye out, whether it's novels or short stories or poetry or nonfiction. We'll keep an eye out for it because it's pretty awesome. And everybody, you can get a copy of Nuha's book. I'm going to put it in the comments. It does not pop up on our website just yet, but you can email us or call us or stop into the store and grab yourself a copy.
Mhm.
All right. Thank you, Nuha. And thanks everybody for watching.